Hi and welcome to the webinar today, The Complete Guide to SEO for Accountants. I'm here with Adrian and Diane from my team. So Adrian is our in-house SEO expert and Diane is our head of marketing operations, and she is going to help out if any questions like the technical side of things, if any trouble connecting, audio, video, that kind of thing, please try and use the chat and she will help you out with that. And me and Adrian will be doing the content. So we'll get started in just a minute, but I'd be really keen to know where you're dialing in from today. If you could just put that in the chat. I'm in the quite sunny but cold South Island of New Zealand, but I'd love to know where you're coming in from. Adrian is, I don't know the exact time you're in, but tell everyone where you are, Adrian.
Actually, I'm in the sunny Philippines, but it's actually the rainy season at the moment, so it's not so sunny.
Nice. Okay, hey, Katina, the Sunshine Coast. Augustine's from New York. Recall Peter's in Perth. How are you all doing? Cool. I'll keep that coming in, and we're going to get kicked off right away and get into it because we've got a lot to cover, but I'm really looking forward to the session today. Cool. So I wonder if any of you have had an email like this from an SEO company. I know I've had quite a few of these over the years where you get promised to be #1 in Google and they tell you that your website is riddled with errors. So yeah, if you get these kind of emails, maybe pretty regularly, yeah, type yes or no in the chat. I imagine a few of you do get them because we often get our clients telling us that they get these emails and sometimes get a bit worried about them because they can be quite convincing, right? These emails are saying you've got these issues with your website and they look quite technical. It looks like the people know what they're doing, not so much this one that I've posted. And it just creates so much confusion around SEO. And myself and Adrian, that's the key goal we've got in this webinar, is to give you clarity over SEO because it's a really complicated topic, but it's also quite simple as well. The basics and the principles are not super complicated, like a lot of things, right? So that's my goal for the session. It's based specifically for accountants and bookkeepers. And my goal is at the end of the session, you're going to have a better understanding of SEO and hopefully less anxiety about it. So we'll come back to that goal at the end. Okay, so a little bit about us and, particularly Adrian, why he is very capable of telling you about SEO. So you tell us a little bit about yourself, Adrian.
Yes, actually, I've been with a lot of different Australian firms before. I've been their marketing manager, especially accounting firms in Australia. So I can say that I know very well the terrain that we're in. Now I head Bizink's client marketing services, where I've managed to actually rank some of our clients to #1 on Google and on the first page. So it's a pretty good achievement for us here in Bizink. So I think you're in a good place right now if you want to know more about SEO for accountants, basically. Yep.
Good stuff. Thanks, Adrian. I'll back that up. Some of the results he's got for our clients have been pretty amazing. Even some national phrases in the US, which is hugely competitive. He's got clients ranking on the first page. So we'll talk about some of those tactics in a little bit. I'm Matt Wilkinson, the founder and CEO of BizInc. So I'm not going to profess to being an SEO expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been doing search marketing for a long time, even before it was called SEO. I'm sad to say, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I had my first business and Google wasn't even popular. It was Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves and those kind of search engines. So I do know a bit about this stuff and more from a point of view of trying to make money out of it. So I think I can add it from a business, some perspectives from a business owner's point of view. So before we move on, yes, thanks for sending that message, John, that you get those kind of spam emails and they often use free email addresses with no unsubscribe. I've got a great response to those people if they either email or call you, is that ask them if they think they're really good at SEO, and obviously they're going to tell you that they are, and ask them if they think that SEO can get you lots of leads, and they'll tell you it can. And then ask them why are they emailing you or calling you if they're so good at SEO, right? It's an interesting point. Okay, let's get into the session. So First thing I wanted to look at, ask Adrian about really is like, how does Google rank websites? Because, we often talk about trying to get to #1 in Google, whatever that means. And, we're going to qualify what that actually means in a little bit. But what is ranking in Google? What how is Google ranking websites? Because I think it's, you correct me on this, Adrian, but there's like, is it 2,000 different factors that Google have in their algorithm on how they rank websites, or maybe it's a lot more, I don't know.
Actually, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think we can even quantify it. We
Yeah.
don't know for sure, but we can have some snippets of it.
Yeah.
But basically, Google will not give you like a trophy, yellow trophy like that on the screen when you rank #1 for Google search. But actually, Google is ranking pages based from their relevancy and usefulness. Basically, trying to think of it as like a library, right? We're trying to look for like cooking cookbooks, right? So the librarian will actually find them from the index books. So it's similar for Google search. It's trying to find the best website and putting it at the top of your search engine results page, basically like that.
I think that's really good to sort of drill into that, in that it's easy to get lost in this kind of algorithm stuff. Like it's, almost like the Matrix is this sort of like really technical thing we've got to unlock. But actually, a couple of things I always like to say. The first thing is that the people who Google employ are the smartest people on the planet, give or take. So
Yeah.
you're not going to outwit them by doing something tricky. Like those days are long gone. Like when I first started doing SEO in the early 2000s, there were some tricky things you could do, but that's almost why Google came to prominence, because they found ways to stop those being important, and so what they're really good at is putting good websites at the top. And by good, it's like Adrian said, relevant websites. So if you are I don't know, I'm just thinking of some like random things. There's a dog grooming business near where I live. So if you're like the expert poodle dog grooming business in New Zealand where I live, then, and you have a website that's all about grooming poodles, or some other breed of dog, and that's all you do on your website, then you've got a pretty good chance of getting to #1 for poodle dog grooming. But then dog grooming, if you broaden that out, well, there's lots of dog groomer websites, and then you broaden that out to like just dogs or something, it gets wider and wider. So the more you have a very specific website, then Google likes that, and that's not particularly a technical thing, right? It's about, if you do the thing that people are searching for and you put that on your website, you got a pretty good chance of ranking. And then such an optimization can give you, I suppose, Adrian, like an extra lift on top of that and that's the optimization bit, is to give you the best chance of ranking well.
Yeah, of course, because Google has to filter all of the noise, right? So what you've mentioned, like a dog grooming business, obviously there are a lot of different search queries, like websites offering the same thing, right? But what makes you like relevant as compared to the others? That's the question. You have to really optimize it for search engines. So it's how Google easily finds you online. If you want to speak on layman's terms, that's really what SEO is. That's really how Google ranks you on their search engine. Yep.
Cool. We'll drill into that a little bit more, especially around the local aspect of that, because that's very important for most accounting and bookkeeping firms, is that people will always tend to, well, not always, they will almost always, when they search for an accountant or bookkeeper, they're going to add a local
Yeah.
term, like the town, the city, the region, or whatever that you're in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'm going to move on to the next section, which is, what is SEO? So we talked about how Google ranks websites. We started to touch on what is SEO, but I'm interested in this because we get asked about SEO all the time. So I'm interested in doing a quick poll, and that is, how would you rate your understanding of SEO? So just going to launch this poll, and it's out of 5. So #1 is I don't have a clue, and #5 is I'm an SEO expert, basically. So you just vote on that. I'd probably put myself in a 3, maybe between a 3 and a 4. Definitely nowhere near a 5. But it's funny because it's probably the thing we get asked, the single most asked about digital marketing tactic and I believe that most people don't really understand it. So just give a second more to vote and just answer that. So 1 to 5, how do you rate your understanding of SEO? Cool. All right. Well, let's end that, and I'm gonna share those results. So most popular answer was 2. So that's basically almost half people said that. 1, 4. Yeah, I said I'd put myself maybe a little bit above a 3. So that's, don't think it's a good or a bad thing. We're here to explain what SEO is. So it's a huge topic. It's always changing, but there are always some constant things you need to do. Like in the 20 odd years I've been doing it, a lot of the same principles are there. So yeah, talk to us about that, Adrian.
Yeah, SEO really is something that's debatable, even, right? Depends who you ask, but there's some like a basic principle that we need to understand because SEO really is not like an olden legend. It's something that you can actually explain and understand if you have the time to do so and the expertise. So I just want to point out that SEO is different from SEM. As you can see on the slide, there's some ads, right? Google AdWords. So SEO is really trying to rank organically, like naturally as possible, without doing some paid search, without spending a dime, doing it organically, if I may say so. And we
Just to
should,
pause there, Adrian, sorry
Hmm?
to interrupt, but would be that two things. Number one is it's really hard to talk about SEO without using jargon, right? Like,
That is
so
true. Mhm.
because it is a very technical discipline of marketing, but organic or natural search listings, which may sound like jargon, but what they are is when you search in Google, you will all have done that and see these adverts on the top. The bit underneath that, they're the unpaid listings. So it will tell you that it's an ad because it says ad next to it. Sometimes, yeah, they're in different places. But the organic or natural listings are the ones that just appear after that. So they're supposedly completely unbiased, just what comes up in Google's algorithm. And that's what SEO is, right? Is trying to do well in those rankings.
Yep, actually, that's it in a nutshell. And really, it's a question of how visible you are online. So if you're more visible, then Google is easier. It becomes easier for Google to find you and for people searching for those terms to find you as well. So SEO really is really explainable. It's not some myth that, but there's a lot of myths surrounding it, which we'll be talking about later on. But SEO really is not the end all and be all of everything, but it's good that we're exploring it,
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about it. Yep.
And in terms of visibility, trying to put this in like layman's terms, would that
Mhm.
be almost like, if you just launch a website and Google will index it? So again, that's jargon, but what Google does is sends out robots and they crawl the internet. So they're just like things browsing the internet, and they're creating an index, a database of all of the sites on the internet. In
Mm.
layman's terms, that's what's happening. And then when someone searches, that's what's being searched. It's not they're searching the internet, they're searching that database, right? So in terms of visibility, is it like saying, you launch your site, it's just there, nothing's linking to it? The more kind of almost like links to it,
Mm.
blogs, social media, they're things that really help you be visible. So it's almost like it's not just a Google thing, it's an actual visibility thing. Is that how you would describe that?
Actually, visibility can be too technical, but if you have like some key phrases that you're actually tracking, so visibility actually gives you an idea of how many of those key phrases are actually ranking in the top 10. So the more keywords that you have in the top 10, for example, if everything of the keywords that you're tracking is actually number one, then you'll have 100% visibility, which is ridiculous. I don't see that happening at all,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives you sort of an idea of how you are sitting at the top 10 of Google search. So of course, if you are more visible, you're in the first page of Google, then actually people are easier. It will become easier for people to find you
Got it.
online.
Okay, cool. And so what are some of the tactics you can use to get your site more visible, basically?
Yeah, there are a lot of different tactics, but basically what you want to do is if you have a website, should be putting relevant content. If you're like a dog grooming business, then you should post articles relating to that. You don't want to be posting anything about cats, right? Because you're in a dog grooming business. So anything related to that, like dog shampoo, like dog grooming tips, some services page, articles, content relating to that. It's one way of organically doing SEO is
Mm-hmm.
for you to be writing about who you are that makes you relevant and useful for people searching for you online.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously, the people listening here, that they're going to be mainly accountants and bookkeepers, CPAs. So the terms like, accountants plus the area they live in, we'll talk more about local search in a while, they're going to be some of the most important ones. And you would
Yep.
also include in that like certain services that were offered and things like that. They're the phrases people would search for. And is there a good tool for finding out which phrases people are using to find either your website or accountants or bookkeepers in your area?
There are actually a lot of good tools to use, one of which is Google Search Console. It's
Mm-hmm.
a free service by Google, which lets you explore which search terms people are actually using to locate your domain or your website. There are obviously a lot of different SEO tools as well, like Ahrefs, SEMrush, and stuff like that, which are paid. But of course, and for example, if you try to do a little Google search of your location plus the word accountants, you'll see a lot of different results. So it's one way of actually researching for yourself which keywords are actually relevant to your business. So there are a lot of different tactics, to be honest, but that's another way of doing that.
Got it. um Dan, if you could dig out the link to Google Search Console, that would be quite cool. And just pop that in the chat if we can
Hmm?
find it. I
Sure.
used to use Google AdWords keyword planner tool. Is that still useful, Adrian, which used to be free?
Yeah, that's still useful, but especially in the context of paid search, because
Yeah,
you'll see some, monetary values and stuff like that. But it's another way of doing that.
yeah.
But as for us, we're doing things organically, right? We're trying to
Mm-hmm,
rank organically. So that's one way of doing it, but in the context of AdWords. But
mm-hmm.
for our own purposes, I think Google Search Console is the best tool for that.
Cool. So find out the keywords people are searching for using those tools. Write content about those topics, and often that is going to be something you've already done on your website. What else can you do? What other tactics are there?
There's some things called on-page or off-page SEO. On-page is really optimizing those things that you can optimize from your end. Like, no, I know this is technical stuff, like those metadata, alt text, making sure that it's relevant, that it has the keywords that you want to rank for. Other things like off-link SEO, off-page SEO, like backlinks, link building, which is not on your hands and can be quite frustrating because it's other websites actually linking or referring your own website. So sometimes it's difficult. Most of the time it's slow and doesn't really promise a lot of immediate results, especially if you're going to do it the not so conventional way of buying links, which is penalized by Google. Those are some of those spammy websites and stuff. So I don't recommend doing that. But basically, what you can do is do whatever it is that you can from your own end, which is on-page SEO.
I think with the off-page stuff, so what we're talking here is one of the main things that made Google's algorithm better. They realized that the more websites that link to a website, the more authority that website has. And then what they did was they ranked those links. So to say, if you get linked to from a really important website, like a news website or a government website, that has more status than being linked to from, your best friend's blog or something like that. Search engine people realized this, and that's where this paying for links came out. So they were trying to just basically get lots of links, and a lot of people got into trouble with that and got penalized. What I would say with this is that there's some really easy things that you can do, you should do, not just because of SEO, but because they help your business. And number one of those would be to get your listing on. So most of you will have probably preferred accounting software, Xero or QuickBooks or MYOB, and they all have directories of accountants and bookkeepers, right? So that is a really high value link that can come back to your website, because all of those are very high traffic, well-known websites that Google would look at as authoritative. So getting that sorted, that's important. Other ones that you could easily get would be other business directories in your area. So it's get that kind of double value of both being good for SEO, but like a lot of SEO, you shouldn't just do it for SEO's sake. It's just good to be linked to from different places because those directories, they're business owners looking for accountants and bookkeepers, and so you might get traffic from those places as well. So I think there's some low-hanging fruit that you can do there, but in terms of maybe like a link building policy, I mean, that's a campaign. There's probably more than most people would want to do, but I would suggest that just doing those basics would be quite good. And what we've also found is that having an active social media profile where people might link back to you as well, that will help as well. So they're things that I would say they're just good marketing practices anyway, and they're going to help with your SEO.
And good thing that you mentioned something about local directories. We have this thing called Google My Business. It's Google's own local search directory. So you got to have that page. You got to have that because there's a lot of people searching for local businesses, and Google prioritizes it actually in the search engine results page. Below the Google AdWords search results is the local listings. So it's even higher than the organic search. So you gotta make sure that you have actually Google My Business listing. Yep.
We'll touch on that in more detail in a little bit, but that is really important, particularly for the type of businesses that most of you have who'll be listening today. Okay, so we could do a session on SEO tactics that lasted for hours and days because it's such a huge topic. And what I would underline is to say that, you wouldn't advise your clients to do probably their own books and accounting, and SEO is almost like something like the forensic accounting of marketing. It's a highly specialized area where you've got to do it, you've got to train, and you've got to really understand it. So I think there's those basic things you can do, which is understand the keywords. You can create content for those keywords, and do those basic backlink things. They're going to really help you. Probably beyond that, you might want to start looking at SEO professionals, because you're gonna spend a lot of time otherwise doing SEO when you probably should be working with clients. So we're going to move on to another topic now, and it's important to understand that SEO is not done in a vacuum. It's a competitive environment. You could do some pretty good SEO, but if your competitors in your local area are doing it better, you still might not get to that coveted #1 spot in Google. But so that's just something to keep in mind, is that just because you've achieved that position, who knows what's going to happen, either because Google changes the way they rank websites, which is annoying, but it happens. But more likely, you've always got people snapping at your heels and trying to overtake you. But what does that mean, that #1 on Google? Does it mean like this guy, dollars just start dropping out of the sky? So I'm interested to know, before we get into this, is do you know if you rank on the first page of Google for any of your key phrases? So we're just going to run another quick poll and see if you do. So yes, no, or not sure. I'll just let you vote on this. So this would be things like, accountants plus the town you're in, or the city you're in, or the suburb you're in. That's what I would describe as a key phrase. So 57% saying no, 24% not sure, and yes, we've got 19%. Just change around a little bit. So interesting. It's hard to get up there a lot of the time. I mean, if you're in a really small area, and if you're the only accounting firm, well, you'd hope you could do it. Obviously, that means probably less people live there, and so it doesn't mean as much potential business. But yeah, what does happen if you rank on the first page? I've been first of Google for different businesses. Sometimes it's meant quite a lot, sometimes it hasn't. So what we thought we'd do bring it to life with a bit of an example. So this is a screenshot from our paid SEO tool, and we typed in the phrase accountant Sydney. So we chose Sydney because we're in this part of the world, biggest city, 6.2 million, I checked today, and the search volume for that specific phrase, as you can see in the top left, is 1,600, which I don't think that's a big number personally. Now, that's the entire amount of searches for that phrase. But if you got to number one for that phrase in the whole of Sydney, and you would back me up on this, Adrian, that'd probably take quite a lot of effort, right? That's a highly competitive search market. You would only get 480 website visitors from that, because the first listing in Google gets 30% of the clicks. That's the average amount of clicks that top listing will get. So 480, I mean, it's not a massive number, but it's still a good number of people to get onto your website. However, it's not 480 potential clients, right? So a lot of those people will be people looking for jobs, people doing research, and all kind of other weird things. It's amazing about people who end up on your website, and some of the things that you would just be surprised. So to put it into context, let's get this down to kind of dollars and cents. The conversion rate of your website, what I mean by that is the amount of people who visit, the amount of people who book a meeting, right, or take an action that's related to sales, divided by the number of visits to your site. That's probably 1% or less. So to put that into context, we all know Amazon.com or .com.au or whichever country you're in. That is the world's biggest e-commerce website, and their conversion rate, depending on which Amazon you look at, is slightly different sites, it's 12 to 15%, which might sound high, might sound like, so that's massively high. I used to have an e-commerce business, but that still means that 88, 85% of people don't buy. For accounting firms, it's obviously way lower. Even if you've got a great website and a great business, you don't have people buying off you like an e-commerce site. It just isn't like that. So if we got 400, so if we got to the top for accountant Sydney, pretty hard, then we get 480 people coming in. 1% of those take an action. So we've got 4 or 5 leads come in, and we don't even know if they're qualified leads or the right type of people, all of that. And you've still got to do the work of converting those 4 or 5 leads into clients. So I'm not trying to be super pessimistic here or say it isn't worth doing SEO. It's just to set expectations that getting to the top of Google isn't always that easy, and even if you do, you're not suddenly going to become rich. I've done it for I've done it for BizInc and various phrases, and I've done it for other businesses, and it can be really good, but not always. And so you can see how that might break down. So we've been talking about some different SEO metrics there. Which are the things that matter? What should you be tracking in terms of metrics, Adrian, when it comes to SEO?
Well, obviously, the first thing that you want to track is ranking, right? Because it's a no-brainer. You want to be on the first page of Google, because not many people actually look for the second page. Being number one gets you how many clicks, being number two gets you even lower, right? So of course, the main goal is to rank number one. That's it. But there are other metrics that we can talk about all day, including visibility, which I've mentioned earlier. It's really, in layman's term, how visible you are to people searching for you, how easy it is for Google to actually look for your website, to index your website. It's one thing. And it really depends on the number of key phrases or keywords that are in the Google top 10. Obviously, the higher it is, the higher your visibility percentage is. And one indicator as well of good SEO is increased traffic on your website. And when we say traffic, there are a lot of different traffics, right? There's like direct traffic, people who are actually searching for your business name, maybe your business address, like people typing BizInc. It's considered as a direct traffic. And the more important traffic is discovery search. which is people are actually searching for similar categories as your businesses. They're like the accountant Sydney, bookkeeper Sydney, similar stuff like that. And for me, it's a good indicator, good metric of SEO actually working for you, because you want to see some numbers changing, right? You don't want to see stagnation. I know SEO is a very difficult and long process, tedious even, but doing step number one will really get you somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where having a full-blown content marketing strategy is going to work. You know, some of you may have heard of a guy called Neil Patel. Neil Patel is worth checking out. He is, I guess, you know, he'd be one of the best known internet digital marketers in the world, and some real common sense stuff about topics like SEO. He was blogging, you know, before a lot of people were,
Yep.
and expert blogging as well. So blogging on very deep, you know, deep dive blogs on digital marketing topics, right? So if you search for almost anything to do with digital marketing, odds on Neil Patel turns up. You know, that's right,
Yep.
isn't it? You know, he's always there with quality content that then leads you to stuff that you want, you know, he wants you to buy from him, and he's pretty good at that bit too. That's where that discovery search would come in, so that, you know, you become the domain expert for a topic. So that could be, you know, a type of accounting service that you do or whatever, and people are finding your firm, and they weren't necessarily even searching for directly for an accountant. It was just that they were
Yep.
searching for a problem or something that they were interested in, and you come up.
Like, for example, we've already established that some keywords actually have high difficulty percentage or difficulty rating, like accountant Sydney. They'll be very hard for you to rank for. But what you can do, for example, if you're selling barbecue grills, right? You can actually optimize for SEO other key phrases, not keywords or long tail keywords. Like, for example, optimal temperature for your barbecue grill, stuff like that, or the best meat cuts for your barbecue, so that when people search for those terms, then it'll actually appear. It's somewhat related to what you are actually doing or to what you're actually trying to rank for.
So you're suggesting accountants and bookkeepers sell barbecues?
No. Like, for example,
No, I'm
how
joking.
do I file my taxes, stuff like that. Very
Yeah,
long tail
exactly.
keyword, but
No,
really
I've got a
gets
good
you to the
example
point.
actually. One of our, this is a really good SEO. This is a really good marketing tip, right? I've often shared this one. So one of BizInc's first clients, he wanted to start blogging. It was before he came to BizInc, and you know, he's like, I've never done blogging before. I've never done digital marketing. So what he did was, he thought about the top 10 problems, questions that clients always ask him. So all of you can do this, right? Like, go, it doesn't have to be 10. Find, you know, what are the questions you're always asked. So I'm going to guess one of them is, can I claim this on expenses? That's one that always comes up, right? Everyone wants to do that. So write a blog post on that. Now, the one that he did was about, can you claim GST on secondhand goods? So GST is like the sales tax of New Zealand. Same in Australia. It's like VAT, or, you know, there's lots of different ones in the States or whatever. So can you claim GST on secondhand goods? Because it was when these like eBay type sites came out, and people were interested in that topic. So he wrote a blog on that. And when he first launched his site with BizInc, his blog used to come above the IRD, so the government tax authority. It came above them for that topic. So that's the kind of thing Adrian's talking about. It's a real example for it. And, you know, as a tip, yeah, write about those challenges that your clients are having, because other people, other business owners all over the area, all over the country you're in, will be having the same challenges. And you can become authoritative on that and get that traffic. And that's cool. You know, he got to number one. Just to qualify that, you know, he said, they definitely got clients from it. They didn't always tend to be A grade clients, because, you know, they were quite unspecific and untargeted, and they did get a lot of time wasters who just wanted free information. So, you know, there's a kind of a blessing and a curse to coming top of Google. Couple of other things just to add to what you said, Adrian. The ranking part, interesting one is that, you know, we talked about this just before the session, was that, you know, usually you've got to be on that first page, but one of BizInc's clients ranks really highly for anything related to SEO in New Zealand. Now, his firm is often on the second page for those searches because the SEO website comes first. So there'll be like 11 listings from SEO, then him. So it's often your ranking versus competitors. So if you're the top of the competitors, you're doing okay. And, me and Adrian like this analogy, which is, if a shark is chasing you, you don't have to be faster than the shark. You just have to be faster than the other people in the water, right? So it's not always number one. You just need to be number one of the pack who you're competing against, because often there'll be those big websites like it's the accounting company or whatever will be above that.
Yep. Perfect analogy.
The other one was just to qualify something else, which was there's a thing called Trinity metrics, which I think is a really cool idea that I've used a lot. I read a book by a guy called Avanish Kushnick. He was one of the guys who created Google Analytics, which is the main tool you use to track your traffic. And he said that generally one metric on its own is not that useful. So for example, he would say, well, if your website traffic goes up, is that good? Well, it's only good if you get more money from that. And so he would talk about Trinity metrics as like three things. So you'd be like, the traffic went up, that traffic came from a certain source, so you can identify where it came from, so you can do more of that thing. And then that traffic resulted in qualified leads or sales. So you put the three things together, and that that really helps. Cool. Well, I've sort of seen a question coming in. Feel free to use the Q&A panel to ask questions. It's really good if we do it as we go along, but we're happy to stay at the end. So Peter's asked, quite a lot of accountants' websites have long articles about technical issues. Is that useful? What would you say on that, Adrian?
I guess if you're trying to contextualize it to your audience or to those actually availing of your services, I think they're not much aware of those technicalities about accounting. So if you can actually dial it down to a more user or reader friendly content on your website, then I guess you have a better chance of actually ranking for stuff. I think you should leave the technical terms to you because you're the ones who's more knowledgeable with that. But if you want to take it a step down a bit so that people can actually relate to what you're writing about and maybe have more chances of actually ranking on Google.
Yeah, totally. That's a really good point. And the other thing I would say is very simple way to think about it. They're useful if people are searching for them. If people aren't searching for those things, they are of no use. No, but not of no use, but they're not going to help your SEO. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, Peter, where we talk about does Google love blogs, which is a bit of an SEO myth, and we'll sort of cover that off then, because I think that's definitely related to that. But yeah, keep your questions coming in. We'll answer those as we go along. So, what we're talking about here is SEO on its own I've seen a lot of firms waste a lot of money by just putting all of their marketing budget into SEO. And, just think back to that example I gave accountant Sydney. So you might get some leads, but is it going to really move the needle for your business? I'm not sure. So like any marketing tactic, or like anything, don't put all your eggs in one basket. When we did these slides, I was like, what's this got to do with Easter, Adrian? And he's like, oh, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So yeah, sorry, I should have realized that. But for me, SEO is important, but it's just one part of your marketing mix. And if you just do SEO and neglect other things, so digital marketing tactics like email marketing, social media, I would be putting them not necessarily before, but I would be prioritizing those in the mix for sure. Plus traditional things like events and networking, they're always going to work. Maybe not during COVID events, but you know what I mean? These can still do webinars and things like that. So SEO works well when combined with other tactics. You agree, Adrian?
Yes. For example, if you're going to the gym, if you're training, right, you're not just gonna train your arms, right? You want to train all of your muscle groups so that you'll achieve that great physique. Similar to marketing, you have to really invest some time and effort in a lot of different marketing tactics like email marketing, social media, SEO, because really one complements the other. You have a good website, might as well do some SEO so that people are actually viewing that good website, right? So that people are actually directed to that website. So for me, SEO is not the end all be all of things. It's one way of getting you a lot of traffic and stuff like that, but you need to do a lot of other marketing tactics as well.
And they all feed into each other, like SEO can put people onto your website, and that doesn't mean they're all going to buy, but they might sign up to your newsletter, or they might connect with you on social, and then become a client later or refer people to. So there's this whole kind of wheel of things going around. They all feed into one another. John's asked the question: does Google like monthly client email newsletters? They're not seen by Google, John, so they're just landing in people's inboxes. So unless you took that content and posted it to your website, Google couldn't see that. So it would have no effect at all. But I would highly recommend you do a monthly email newsletter. It's a hugely effective tactic, but yeah, not in terms of SEO. It won't help that. And yeah, I mean, that's something that I often hear marketers talk about, or people are always like, will this help our SEO? And like it's there's things that are worth doing, but they're not going to help your SEO. There's lots of things that are worth doing that have no bearing on your SEO, but they're still worth doing on your website. It isn't the be all and the end all.
Yep.
Keep the questions coming in. So what we want to give you is one key takeaway, because SEO, as we've talked about, is very technical and it's full of jargon. And well, we're just going to give you a bit more jargon, but it's easy to explain. And that's NAP, or do we say NAP? I don't know. NAP or NAP? How do you
It's like
say it?
question of GIF or GIF,
GIF.
GIF, right?
Yeah, it's GIF.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but your NAP is your name, address, and phone number, and this is something that I think all of you can take away and do today. It's real easy, and it's really important, right, Adrian?
Yep, because Google actually is very big on local searches. As I've mentioned earlier, this is the one that I'm talking about. As you can see, Google AdWords sits on top because you're paying for it, right? Might as well sit on top. The second best thing is the local search results. That's why it's important that you have a consistent NAP on all of your online presence, meaning your website's content page, your Google My Business listing, maybe your Facebook page about section. So if you want to replace your phone number on one, you should replace all of them, because Google actually values accurate information across the board. So when people actually searches for like accountant Sydney, then that local search result will come up. You want to make sure that your phone number is updated, that your website is updated in there, and it's updated on all of your online presence. Yep.
Yeah, cool. So hopefully everyone feels confident with doing that. I think that's just such a easy, important one. And, Adrian has told me that. I've talked to various SEO people, and they've all stressed the importance of that, even down to like how you punctuate your address. People have told me, write it in the exact same format, because, it's not like Google's going to go, right, we're going to smash these down to the bottom if it's not the same. But they want to, they really want to see like one domain, one website, one address, one set of contact details. And if that matches up with your Facebook and wherever else, it just legitimizes you. And so it's just a simple thing that you can do, and hopefully it appeals to the accountant and bookkeeper in you to keep everything consistent. So
Yeah.
that's what you can take away and just do.
Another trick that I may share with you is, that local search result listing. There's this thing called Google Maps. The pin, the correct address should be the one in the pin. So you should be using that consistently on your website, on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn. That exact same address on Google Maps. Yep.
And we've seen that before where firms have moved, and it gets a bit tricky, because I think you still have to get a letter, right, sent to your address to verify that. Am I
Yeah, yeah.
correct in that? Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
Google will send you a physical mail
Yep.
with the verification code that you have to
Yep.
input online to verify that you've actually moved to a certain location. Yep.
Yep.
It's that important to Google.
Yeah, but there you go. Actually, that emphasizes it, right? They will send you a physical letter to do that. So I'm sure some of you've done that already, but that's the key takeaway. You know, we're not going to fill you with full of like SEO stuff that's really complicated and you're probably not going to do, but this is a thing that you can do and know that it's a really important. I mean, it's important as well, right? Because people are looking for you on those places, and if your contact details are wrong, then that's a bad thing. But yeah, Google will really value that because local search is so important, particularly for accountants and bookkeepers, right? So we use the Sydney example, and obviously, 1,600 people do search for that phrase, but it's much more likely that people will search for suburbs, right? So we had to look at like Bondi Junction. That was just a quick one that we looked at, and there's about 400 odd people searched for that. I don't think it was that many actually, but whatever, a couple of hundred people. So people will use a suburb or a small town or whatever. You would know those things the way people talk about it. But yeah, quickly, Adrian, how does local search work compared to Google's normal search?
Actually, it's like a free local business directory for you. Google emphasizes heavily on local searches. In fact, it's very much important and popular with mobile phones, especially people searching for like restaurants nearby, and Google will pop up those restaurants within a certain kilometer radius. And just to give you a little bit of a statistic, 76% of people who actually search for nearby businesses end up going to them within a day's time. So it's really, really important that you optimize your local search listing. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Now, we were talking about this session and a couple of almost like quirky things, but I think they will apply to some of you. So, what if a business has a national reach? So, one of our
Mhm.
clients is in one state in the US, but they serve all the states, and they wanted to de-emphasize where they were from. Would you recommend that as a good or a bad idea, Adrian?
I don't think that will be a good idea because you'll be missing a lot on Google local search results if you do that. You still have to put your headquarters, your main office in there, because as we've put in the previous slides, it goes number two to AdWords, the local search results. So you want to be in there because people are lazy, right? They're not gonna skim through all of the first page of Google even. So you want to be as high as possible on Google search engine results page. So if you're not listing your headquarters, you're missing on a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting story on that. Like my mate had a accounting firm which he sold, one of the big zero firms in New Zealand, and they started off local to me and built a good client base. But because it was the cloud and all of that, they were like, well, let's go national. But what they actually found was that, of course, that's possible, but really, and this is just down to people, a lot of people like their accountant or bookkeeper to be local. And he said that, a lot of people said to him, yeah, I just like seeing the sign. I just like knowing that because he asked them, like, does it matter to you? And they said, yeah, just, it's irrational, but I just like to see that sign in town. It gives me security. So that's just a human nature thing. And it's not that you can't have a national firm. Of course, there are national firms, but that local part is important because it's important to humans. Final one on that then. What if you work virtually or don't want to show your address? So like BizInc's a bit like this in that we're a virtual company. We have staff all over the world, different time zones, different locations. We don't have an office, and we don't know, and we have clients all over the world, right? So we don't necessarily want to put, we're in any one place. How do you think a firm should address that?
Well, there are a lot of different tactics that you can use for SEO. You can emphasize that you work globally, but you shouldn't de-emphasize that you're actually in New Zealand, for example. You
Mhm,
don't have to specify the suburb, the street name, and stuff like that.
mhm,
You can do is you can put like Otago, whatever, in your contact us as the
mhm.
main headquarters, and it'll be still picked up by Google Maps or Google search results in the Google My Business listing. I guess putting a local flavor or a local element on your business is still good. So it gives you a lot of competitive advantage if you do that, but not actually de-emphasizing that you're actually a global firm. You know,
Yeah, got
there
it.
are two different firms. They can exist together. You know, they don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
different things.
Yeah, we were talking about it and we said like maybe a nice approach is you could put, based in wherever, but serving the whole of the US, the whole of Australia, the whole of the world, and I've seen that done well before. So, it's being proud of where you're from, but also suggesting that in what you do. Cool. Well, we've not got that much longer. Keep the questions coming in, and just wanted to run through really quickly a few SEO myths because we get asked this stuff all the time. So we just wanted to clear them up. First one's easy, right? When you get one of those emails like I began with, who are telling you they can guarantee you first place in Google, they can't. That's right. Hey, Adrian, you just cannot say that.
Yep, yep. There are a
Nobody
lot of
can do that.
factors. There are a lot of things to consider for you to rank number one. It's a constant struggle. It's an everyday thing. It's weekly monitoring. There are a lot of
Yeah.
processes involved. There's no guarantee, obviously, but SEO is being done.
Yeah. You can't guarantee that. And just on that local search thing, if I searched for accountant Sydney in New Zealand, you did in the Philippines, someone else did it in Sydney, we'd all get different results, right? So the number one is different depending where you search for. So that's an interesting kind of twist on that. Okay. The next one, I get asked this all the time. I get asked it this week. Does Google penalize duplicate content? And the answer is no, right? So I'm going to get, Diane, would you mind posting the link on this slide into the chat? So this is the head of Google telling you that this isn't the case. Yet I get asked this twice a week minimum. I have this saved in my favorites. And it's a weird myth that's built up around something that Google did to penalize very spammy sites about 10 years ago. And most of the internet is duplicate content, as you'll see Matt Cutts, the ex-head of search at Google, talk about, with the social media or whatever. Shared content is just a big part of the internet. So why would they penalize that? So unless you're doing something that's really spammy, which I hope none of you are, you're going to be fine. Next one, Google loves blogs, right, Adrian? So, we kind of touched on this with the technical articles one. Google doesn't especially love any type of content, right?
Yeah.
It's web pages it's looking at. Doesn't matter if it's a blog, a landing page, it's just pages to them. Is that right?
Yep. They don't recognize it. It's just a page. They're robots, right?
Yeah.
They will crawl anything and everything on your website. Blogs is one way of doing that. If you are a thought leader about something and you want to rank for it, then it's a good thing. But it doesn't really like discriminate whatever it is on your website.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? And again, it's one of those things where it's just a good marketing thing. If you're gonna become an expert on a topic and you want to do blogs about it and LinkedIn and whatever, and do stuff on Facebook Live or whatever, they're all good things because they're just, it's marketing. And the bonus is, if people search for you, then they're going to find those things if they're searching for those topics. Google doesn't discriminate on technology too much either. And that SEO people will tell you you've got to build your site this way or whatever. You'll all know a site that looks diabolical. It was built in the 90s and it's like the number one for that topic because it's just been around forever. I can think of several sites, like I'm into rock climbing, and there's certain rock climbing sites that the technology behind them is shocking, but the content is so deep. They've been around for so long. Google loves them. I mean, it just if it can be searched, it doesn't care, right? It's just a web page. It's just data. Okay, last one. Having lots of domain names helps with SEO. Someone talked to me about this morning. They were all pleased that they bought like 20 domain names related to their business. Throw them in the bin. Save yourself $200 a year or whatever. Google, like that name, address, phone number thing that Adrian talked about, Google likes one website, one domain. So pointing lots of domains at your website, there's a bit of disagreement on it. People either think it makes no difference, it doesn't help you, or it might have a slight negative effect. But everyone agrees there's no positive to that, right, Adrian?
Yeah, because it's quite confusing, right? Don't want to look spammy. Just want to have one consistent domain with one consistent location, phone number, address. So
Yeah.
I don't see any wisdom or value with that.
It was one of those things that in the past was, was a big deal in spammy SEO. Like that was the type of thing that probably worked for 6 months in 2001, and then they changed their algorithm and it doesn't work anymore. Well, there's a few more questions coming in, which we'll stick around to answer. Thanks a lot for listening today. We hope we've given you, some good overview of what SEO is and some tips, particularly that name, address, phone number, which is one you can take away. If you like help with SEO, a few things that we can do for you. All of our websites are optimized for search engines, in terms of the technical side, plus we write SEO content. If you're looking for higher conversion, so taking the traffic that comes from from search engines or other places, we help you get a higher conversion with things like lead magnets. So giving away content to grab people's email addresses and nurturing them. Because if they just hit your website and you're hoping they'll contact you, it's a bit like a leaky bucket if you do that. So you need to do things like lead magnets. We can help with that. For our clients, we do SEO packages, which is what you'd be working with Adrian, and he'd be doing some of this cool stuff he's been talking about. Or you'll all be getting a copy of our complete guide to SEO for accountants after the session, which is a really cool, more in-depth look at this topic. So if you're interested in chatting to our sales team about a website or SEO package, and that's clients only, like I mentioned, Diane's put the book a demo link in the chat, and we can get talking about that for you. So we've got a few more minutes for questions, and question from Bruce, which is, how important is it having the right heading tags on the pages? And I was actually going to include something about this, which is from Matt Cutts, who's the search engine, used to be the head of search at Google, I talked about before. So often SEO people say having an H1 tag at the top is really important. That's got to have your key phrase in. What he said is like, it's optimal to format your website in the right way. So just like a Word doc where you do heading 1, 2, 3, 4, it's optimal to do it the right way. Does Google penalize you or even boost you because you've done that? Absolutely not, because most websites in the world, and I can't remember the statistic he gave, but it's like, huge percentage. The way they've done the technical side is technically not perfect. But why would Google penalize that? If most people do it wrong, they're not going to penalize them for doing something which is just like a common issue. So heading tags are, somewhat important, but it's again one of these like slightly outdated SEO things that probably was maybe important for a little bit of time in the early 2000s, and you kind of like, I would say slightly unscrupulous SEO people want to talk about that stuff because it creates work for them.
And actually, there's this article in Search Engine Journal, which I'll be posting in the chat box. They released it last June. It's actually about that, talking about that. It's Google's John Mueller. It basically says that it doesn't matter anymore right now because of advancements in semantic search on Google. So I've dropped that in the chat box, and you can see that it's doesn't matter anymore
Yeah.
at the moment. The text ratio, the H1 tags, don't have to mention your key phrases on H1 tags. Doesn't really matter anymore right now. Yep.
I think that's just like, maybe to wrap up on that point, is that the days where you could just put your key phrase on a page and throw it in a few times into the content are gone. Google gets ever more sophisticated, and a lot of people have talked about SEO being dead, which it isn't, but the days of these kind of like real simple tactics are gone, and it is really about that kind of like mix of things that you're doing and building a good website and just having like a well-rounded approach to it, rather than taking a very narrow keyword centric approach. Is actually, Google's a lot more sophisticated, that they understand natural language a lot more. And so, yeah, these technical tricks, I don't think that's the key to SEO. It's really just doing good marketing like we talked about at the start. Hey, Adrian.
Yeah, and it's writing for actual readers, not for search engines. You need to remember that you're actually writing for people. Google ranks you for relevant content, for useful content. So you want to make it useful for other people, not for robots, right?
Yep. That's a great way to wrap things up, is that, remember that if you get even to number one in Google, the thing you're trying to make happen is real people visit your website and do something. So unless you've made a site that works for real people, it doesn't matter that you're getting a bunch of traffic, because your website isn't going to convert those people into leads. Cool. Well, thanks very much for all of your insights today, Adrian. Thanks, Diane, for running the ship behind the scenes, and thanks to everyone for coming along today. Hope you found that useful. We'll be sending you the recording and also a copy of the complete guide to SEO for accountants, which is the ebook, and that's a really good read. If you have any questions, you'll have our contact details in there. Feel free to reach out, and have a great day. We'll wrap the session up there.